The morning mist clung to the rocky hills like a gray blanket, hiding dangers that would soon reveal themselves in the most deadly way possible. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez crouched behind a large boulder, her rifle ready, watching as her fellow rangers moved through the valley below. They had been tracking enemy forces for 3 days through this unforgiving terrain, and intelligence suggested they were close to their target. The operation had seemed straightforward when briefed back at base camp. A small enemy unit had been conducting raids on supply convoys, and the Rangers were tasked with locating and neutralizing the threat. What the intelligence reports hadn't mentioned was how perfectly the enemy had chosen their hunting ground. Captain Rodriguez led the 12-person Ranger unit down the narrow valley, following what appeared to be the only passable route through the mountainous region. Maria stayed on the ridge, providing overwatch as the designated marksman for the squad. Her position gave her a clear view of the valley floor and the surrounding hills, or so she thought. The first shot came without warning. The crack of a rifle echoed off the valley walls as Private Johnson stumbled and fell to the ground. Captain Rodriguez immediately shouted orders for his men to take cover. But the rocky valley floor offered little protection. The Rangers scattered, diving behind whatever small rocks and bushes they could find. Maria scanned the hills through her scope, searching for the source of the shot. The enemy sniper had fired from somewhere across the valley, but the exact location remained hidden. She could see her fellow Rangers pinned down below, unable to move without exposing themselves to the hidden shooter. A second shot rang out, this one coming from a completely different direction. Corporal Williams cried out as the bullet struck his shoulder, sending him sprawling behind a small outcropping of rocks. The Rangers were now taking fire from at least 2 different positions, and Maria realized they were dealing with more than just one enemy sniper. Through her radio, she heard Captain Rodriguez calling for a situation report. His voice was calm but urgent, the voice of a leader trying to keep his unit alive under deadly circumstances. Maria keyed her microphone and reported what she could see from her elevated position. Overwatch to ground team, I count at least 2 shooter positions. One approximately 400 meters northeast of your position, another roughly 300 meters to the southeast. I cannot get a clear visual on either target. The captain's response was immediate. Roger. Overwatch. Can you provide counter-sniper fire? Maria studied the terrain through her scope, but the enemy snipers had chosen their positions with deadly precision. They were shooting from concealed locations that offered them perfect fields of fire over the valley, while remaining hidden from her position on the ridge. Each time one of her fellow Rangers tried to move, another shot would crack across the valley, forcing them back into cover. A third shot came from yet another direction, this one from the western ridge. The bullet struck the rock inches from where Sergeant Thompson was hiding, sending chips of stone flying through the air. Maria's blood ran cold as she realized the full extent of the trap her unit had walked into. They weren't dealing with 2 snipers. There were multiple enemy shooters positioned around the valley, all with overlapping fields of fire. She quickly counted the different shooting positions based on the sound and direction of the incoming fire. Each shot seemed to come from a new location, and the enemy was clearly well prepared for this ambush. The Rangers were caught in what military tacticians call a killing field, an area where enemy forces can deliver devastating fire from multiple concealed positions. Through her radio, Maria could hear her fellow Rangers calling out their status. Several were wounded, but they remained in fighting condition. The problem was that none of them could move without exposing themselves to the enemy snipers, who seemed to have every inch of the valley floor covered. Captain Rodriguez tried to coordinate a movement to better cover, but each attempt resulted in more incoming fire. The enemy snipers were disciplined and patient, waiting for any sign of movement before engaging. They had turned the valley into a death trap, and the Rangers were caught right in the middle of it. Maria continued scanning the hills, trying to identify the enemy positions. The morning sun was rising higher, and the mist was beginning to clear, but the snipers remained invisible. They were using natural concealment and probably camouflaged positions that would be nearly impossible to spot from her current location. A 4th shot cracked across the valley, followed quickly by a 5th from a different direction. Maria counted the shots and realized they were facing at least 5 different enemy snipers, possibly more. Each one was positioned to cover a different section of the valley, creating an interlocking network of deadly crossfire. The situation was becoming desperate. Her fellow rangers had been pinned down for over an hour, and several were wounded and in need of medical attention. Ammunition was not yet a concern, but water and medical supplies would become critical if they remained trapped much longer. Maria tried moving to different positions along the ridge, hoping to get a better angle on the enemy snipers, but each new position only revealed how well planned the ambush was. The enemy had positioned their shooters to cover not just the valley floor but also the surrounding ridges where a friendly overwatch position might be established. The seventh shot came from a position that Maria hadn't even considered before, directly behind her unit's position at the mouth of the valley. The Rangers were not just pinned down, they were completely surrounded by hidden enemy snipers who could engage them from any direction. Through her scope, Maria watched as Captain Rodriguez tried to organize his trapped unit. The captain was a veteran of multiple deployments, and his tactical knowledge was keeping his Rangers alive. But even his experience couldn't overcome the overwhelming disadvantage they faced. The enemy snipers continued their deadly game, taking carefully aimed shots whenever one of the Rangers exposed even a small part of their body. They were professional marksmen who understood the value of patience and precision. Each shot was calculated to keep the Rangers pinned down, without wasting ammunition on unlikely targets. Maria realized that traditional counter-sniper tactics wouldn't work in this situation. The enemy had too many shooters in too many well-concealed positions. A direct assault would be suicide, and calling for artillery or air support would take too long, and might not even be effective against such well-hidden targets. As the morning wore on, the situation only got worse. An eighth shot came from yet another previously unknown position, confirming Maria's growing fear that they were facing a much larger and more organized enemy force than anyone had anticipated. The enemy snipers were demonstrating remarkable fire discipline, taking only the shots they were certain they could make, and maintaining their concealment between engagements. They had obviously prepared for this ambush extensively, choosing their positions and fields of fire with deadly precision. Maria continued her attempts to locate the enemy positions, but the snipers were simply too well hidden and too numerous for a single marksman to engage effectively. She found herself in the frustrating position of being unable to help her trapped comrades despite her elevated position and superior equipment. The psychological pressure on the pinned Rangers was immense. They could hear the enemy bullets striking the rocks around them, but they couldn't see their attackers or effectively return fire. This type of one-sided engagement could break the morale of even experienced troops if it continued for too long. Through her radio, Maria could hear the strain in her fellow Rangers' voices as they reported their status and called for assistance. Captain Rodriguez maintained his calm leadership, but Maria could tell that even he was struggling to find a solution to their desperate situation. The enemy snipers had created the perfect trap, and the Rangers had walked right into it. Now, Maria had to find a way to turn the tables on 8 hidden enemy marksmen who held all the advantages in this deadly game of cat and mouse that was playing out in the Rocky Hills. Maria forced herself to slow down and think methodically about the problem facing her unit. Panic and rushed decisions would only get more people killed. She needed to approach this like the professional marksman she was, using her training and experience to find weaknesses in what seemed like an impossible situation. She began by studying the pattern of enemy fire more carefully. Each shot came from a different position, but there had to be some logic to how the enemy snipers were coordinating their attacks. Professional snipers didn't just fire randomly. They followed predetermined plans and communication protocols. Through her high-powered scope, Maria started mapping out the approximate positions of each enemy sniper based on the angle and sound of their shots. She used her rangefinder to estimate distances and began sketching a rough tactical map in her notebook. The enemy positions formed a rough semicircle around the valley, with overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. The first enemy sniper position was located somewhere on the northeastern ridge, approximately 400 meters from the trapped Rangers. The shots from this position had been the most frequent, suggesting it was probably the primary position, with the best overall view of the valley. The second position was to the southeast, about 300 meters away, positioned to cover the southern approach to the valley. The third position was on the western ridge, and the fourth was somewhere behind the Rangers' entry point to the valley. Maria realized that the enemy had positioned snipers at all 4 cardinal directions around the valley, creating an inescapable killing field. But that wasn't all. There were at least 4 more positions she had identified, based on the different shooting angles and times between shots. Maria began to notice something important about the timing of the enemy fire. The snipers weren't shooting randomly, or even opportunistically. They were following a coordinated pattern, with each sniper covering specific sectors and time intervals. This level of coordination required excellent communication between the different positions. She started listening more carefully to the intervals between shots and noticed that there were brief pauses that seemed too regular to be coincidental. The enemy snipers were probably using radio communication to coordinate their fire, and those brief pauses might indicate when they were communicating with each other or with a central command position. This realization gave Maria her first real tactical advantage. If the enemy snipers were using radio communication, they might be vulnerable to disruption or interference. More importantly, their need to communicate meant that there might be a command position that was coordinating the entire ambush. Maria began scanning the surrounding area for any signs of a command post or communication equipment. Enemy sniper teams operating at this level of coordination would need sophisticated communication gear, and probably a central observation post where a commander could coordinate the different shooting positions. Through her scope, she began looking for unnatural shapes or colors that might indicate enemy equipment or personnel. The enemy snipers were well camouflaged, but command posts often required more equipment and might be easier to spot than individual sniper positions. After nearly an hour of careful observation, Maria noticed something suspicious on a hill approximately 600 meters to the north of the valley. There was a small grove of trees that seemed slightly different from the surrounding vegetation. The trees were arranged in a way that could provide natural concealment for a larger group of people or equipment. She adjusted her scope and studied the tree line more carefully. At first, she saw nothing unusual, but then she caught a brief flash of reflected light that could have come from optical equipment like binoculars or a radio antenna. The flash lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough to confirm that there was human activity in that location. Maria realized she might have found the enemy command position. If she was correct, taking out the command post could disrupt the coordination between the different sniper positions and give her fellow rangers a chance to escape the trap. However, engaging the command post would also reveal her own position to the enemy snipers, making her a target. Once she fired, she would have to move quickly to avoid return fire from multiple enemy positions. She would also need to make sure her shots were effective, because she might only get one opportunity. She began planning her approach carefully. The command post was at the extreme range of her weapon system, but still, within her effective engagement distance. The angle would be difficult, requiring her to shoot across the valley and up a steep slope, but it was achievable with the right calculations for wind and elevation. Maria checked her equipment and ammunition, making sure everything was ready for what would likely be a running gun battle once she opened fire. She had enough ammunition for an extended engagement, and her rifle was functioning perfectly. Her position on the ridge gave her good fields of fire in multiple directions, which would be important if she needed to engage multiple targets quickly. Before acting on her plan to attack the command post, Maria decided to try to confirm the positions of the individual enemy snipers more precisely. If she could locate some of the sniper positions, she might be able to engage them after taking out the command post, further disrupting the enemy's ability to keep her unit pinned down. She began using a technique called sniper baiting that she had learned in advanced marksman training. By carefully observing the enemy sniper's reactions to movement from her trapped comrades, she could estimate their exact positions and fields of fire. Maria coordinated with Captain Rodriguez over the radio, asking him to have his rangers make small, controlled movements that would provoke enemy fire but not expose them to serious danger. Each time one of the rangers moved slightly, Maria carefully observed where the return fire came from and made notes about the enemy positions. Through this process, she was able to confirm the locations of 6 of the 8 enemy sniper positions. 2 positions remained hidden, probably because they were in reserve or covering sectors that hadn't been tested yet. Still, knowing the locations of 6 enemy snipers was a significant tactical advantage. Maria realized that the enemy sniper positions were not all equally well protected. Some were in naturally strong positions with good cover and concealment, while others were positioned primarily for their fields of fire and might be more vulnerable to return fire. The sniper position on the southeastern ridge appeared to be the most vulnerable. The shooter there had to expose himself more to get clear shots at the trapped Rangers, and Maria calculated that she could probably engage that position successfully after her initial attack on the command post. She began developing a prioritized target list, based on which enemy positions posed the greatest threat to her fellow Rangers, and which ones she had the best chance of neutralizing quickly. The command post remained her primary target, but she now had a plan for engaging multiple enemy positions in rapid succession. Maria also considered the possibility that some of the enemy snipers might try to relocate after she began her attack. Professional snipers are trained to move frequently to avoid counter-sniper fire, and she would need to account for this in her planning. She identified several alternative positions that the enemy snipers might move to, and began planning how to engage those positions as well. This type of three-dimensional tactical thinking was what separated expert marksmen from ordinary shooters. The psychological pressure of the situation was enormous. 8 enemy snipers had her entire unit pinned down, and any mistake in her attack plan could result in the deaths of her fellow Rangers. However, Maria had trained for exactly this type of scenario throughout her military career. She forced herself to remain calm and focused, using the breathing and concentration techniques she had learned in sniper school. The lives of 12 Rangers depended on her ability to execute a nearly impossible tactical solution to an overwhelming enemy advantage. As the afternoon sun began to change the shadows in the valley, Maria knew she was running out of time. Her fellow Rangers couldn't remain pinned down indefinitely, and the enemy snipers showed no signs of letting up their deadly vigilance. She would have to act soon, and her plan would have to be perfect. Maria steadied her breathing and aligned her rifle scope on the suspected command post in the grove of trees 600 meters away. The afternoon shadows were starting to lengthen, which would work in her favor by making it harder for the enemy snipers to spot her muzzle flash when she opened fire. She made final adjustments to her scope, accounting for the distance, wind speed, and elevation difference between her position and the target. The shot would be challenging but well within her capabilities as a trained marksman. More importantly, it would be the opening move in a deadly chess game that would determine whether her fellow Rangers lived or died. Through her radio, Maria coordinated with Captain Rodriguez one final time. She explained her plan to attack the suspected enemy command post, and then systematically engage the individual sniper positions she had identified. The captain understood the risks involved but agreed that it was their best and possibly only chance to break free from the trap. Maria settled into her final shooting position, using a natural rest in the rocks to steady her rifle. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow as she prepared to take the most important shot of her military career. Through her scope, she could see the tree line where she suspected the enemy command post was located. She waited patiently, scanning the area for any sign of movement or equipment that would confirm her target. After several minutes, she saw what she was looking for: a brief movement in the shadows that indicated human presence. Someone was moving between the trees, probably coordinating the sniper positions or observing the trapped Rangers below. Maria took careful aim at the center of the suspected command area and slowly squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder as the bullet traveled across the valley at over 3,000 feet per second. Through her scope, she saw the impact as dirt and debris flew up from the tree line, followed immediately by signs of confusion and movement in the enemy position. Without waiting to assess the full damage of her first shot, Maria quickly shifted her aim to the southeastern sniper position that she had identified as the most vulnerable. The enemy sniper there had been active throughout the morning, and she had a good idea of his exact location based on his previous shots. She fired her second shot within 15 seconds of the first, targeting the rocky outcropping where the southeastern sniper was hidden. This shot was at a shorter range and a better angle, and Maria was confident it had found its target when she saw no return fire from that position for the next several minutes. The effect of Maria's attack on the enemy coordination was immediate and dramatic. The disciplined, coordinated fire from the enemy snipers suddenly became erratic and confused. Several positions stopped firing altogether, while others began shooting wildly at suspected targets, rather than taking the careful, aimed shots they had been using all morning. Maria quickly moved to a new position along the ridge, knowing that the enemy snipers would now be looking for her and trying to pinpoint her location. She had gained the element of surprise with her first 2 shots, but now she was in a running gun battle with multiple enemy marksmen who knew she was hunting them. From her new position, Maria could see increased activity around several of the enemy sniper positions. Some were clearly trying to relocate to avoid her counter-sniper fire, while others were attempting to coordinate a response to her attacks. The confusion in their ranks gave her the opportunity she needed to continue her systematic assault. She identified the northeastern sniper position that had been the most active throughout the morning. This sniper had taken more shots at her fellow rangers than any other, and eliminating him would significantly reduce the pressure on the trapped unit below. The position was well concealed, but Maria had been studying it for hours and had a good idea of where the sniper was hiding. Her third shot was more difficult because the target had improved his concealment since her attack began. Maria had to wait for several minutes, watching through her scope until the enemy sniper shifted position slightly to get a shot at one of the rangers below. The brief exposure was all she needed. The shot was perfect. Maria saw the impact through her scope and immediately knew that the northeastern position was no longer a threat. 3 enemy snipers were now out of action, and the remaining 5 were clearly rattled by her unexpected counterattack. The western ridge position was her next target. This sniper had been less active but was positioned to cover the Rangers' most likely escape route from the valley. Taking out this position would open up options for her trapped comrades to move to better cover or even begin withdrawing from the killing field. Maria moved again, this time to a position that gave her a better angle on the western ridge. The enemy sniper there had learned from the fate of his comrades and was being much more careful about exposure. But Maria was patient. She knew that eventually, the sniper would have to expose himself to engage targets, and she would be waiting. The opportunity came when the western sniper attempted to take a shot at Sergeant Thompson, who was trying to move to a position where he could help treat the wounded Rangers. The sniper had to lean out from his concealment to get the angle he needed, and Maria was ready. Her 4th shot echoed across the valley, and the western position immediately fell silent. 4 enemy snipers were now eliminated, and Maria could see that her fellow Rangers were beginning to take advantage of the reduced enemy fire to improve their positions and treat their wounded. The remaining enemy snipers were now in full defensive mode, no longer attempting to coordinate their fire or maintain the systematic suppression of the Rangers. Each was operating independently, trying to stay alive while maintaining some level of threat to the trapped unit. Maria knew she had to maintain the pressure and continue hunting the remaining enemy positions before they could reorganize or call for reinforcements. The element of surprise was fading, and the longer she took, the more likely it was that the enemy would develop an effective counter-strategy. The 5th enemy position was located behind the Rangers' entry point to the valley. This sniper had been covering the exit route, preventing any possibility of retreat. Maria had to move to yet another position to get a clear shot, which exposed her to potential fire from the remaining enemy snipers. As she moved, 2 enemy snipers fired at her position, their bullets striking the rocks around her and sending stone fragments flying. Maria dove for cover and quickly assessed her situation. The enemy snipers were now actively hunting her, which meant she was no longer able to take her time and plan each shot carefully. She reached her new position and quickly scanned for the sniper covering the exit route. The position was well hidden in a cluster of large boulders, and the sniper was using the natural camouflage effectively. Maria had to wait and watch for any sign of movement or equipment that would give away the exact location. After several tense minutes, she spotted the barrel of the enemy rifle protruding slightly from between 2 rocks. It was a small target at a difficult angle, but Maria had trained for exactly this type of precision shooting. She steadied her rifle, controlled her breathing, and fired. The 5th enemy sniper was eliminated, opening up the Rangers' exit route from the valley. Captain Rodriguez immediately began organizing his unit to take advantage of the opportunity Maria had created, moving the wounded Rangers to better positions and preparing for a possible withdrawal. Maria now faced the 3 remaining enemy snipers, who had become much more aggressive in their attempts to locate and eliminate her. They were firing more frequently at suspected positions and had apparently abandoned their original mission of keeping the Rangers pinned down in favor of dealing with the threat she represented. The 6th enemy position was on the northern ridge, positioned to cover the high ground around the valley. This sniper had been relatively quiet throughout the engagement, probably serving as an overwatch for the other positions. Now he was actively hunting for Maria. and she could see muzzle flashes from his position as he fired at various points along her ridge. Maria used the enemy sniper's own aggression against him. By observing his firing pattern, she could predict when and where he would expose himself for his next shot. When he fired at what he thought was her position, Maria was already aiming at his location, waiting for the muzzle flash that would reveal his exact position. Her sixth shot was fired almost simultaneously with the enemy sniper's attempt to hit her. Both bullets crossed the valley at the same time, but only Maria's found its target. The northern position fell silent, leaving only 2 enemy snipers still in action. The remaining 2 snipers were now in desperate situations. They had watched 6 of their comrades eliminated by a single enemy marksman, and they knew that their own survival depended on locating and killing Maria before she could complete her systematic destruction of their unit. Both snipers began firing rapidly at any position where they thought Maria might be hiding. Their shots were less accurate than the careful, aimed fire they had been using earlier. But the volume of fire was dangerous. Maria had to keep moving to avoid being hit by the increasingly desperate enemy attempts to kill her. The 7th enemy sniper was positioned on the eastern slope, where he had been covering the southern approach to the valley. Maria could see his muzzle flashes as he fired repeatedly at her general area, but his exact position remained hidden behind a screen of rocks and vegetation. Maria decided to use a flanking maneuver to get a better angle on the eastern position. This meant leaving her ridge and moving through more open terrain, but it would give her the opportunity to attack from an unexpected direction. The risk was enormous, but she knew that remaining in her current position would eventually result in the enemy snipers pinpointing her location. She moved quickly and quietly along the hillside, using natural terrain features to mask her movement from the remaining enemy positions. The eastern sniper was still firing at her previous location, unaware that she was now approaching from a completely different direction. From her new position, Maria had a clear view of the eastern sniper's location. He was partially hidden behind a large rock, but enough of his body was visible for an accurate shot. Maria took careful aim and fired, eliminating the 7th enemy sniper and leaving only 1 enemy marksman still alive. The final enemy sniper had stopped firing altogether. He had either been hit by one of Maria's previous shots or was trying to remain hidden while planning his next move. Maria scanned all the possible positions where the 8th sniper could be hiding, but she couldn't locate him visually. She decided to coordinate with her fellow rangers to flush out the last enemy sniper. Through her radio, she directed Captain Rodriguez to have his rangers make coordinated movements that would force the hidden sniper to reveal his position or allow the rangers to escape from the valley entirely. The plan worked perfectly. As the rangers began their coordinated movement, the final enemy sniper was forced to expose himself to engage them. Maria was ready and waiting, her rifle trained on the area where she expected him to appear. Her final shot of the engagement was also her longest and most difficult, but her hours of patient observation and careful planning paid off. The 8th and last enemy sniper was eliminated, ending the deadly ambush that had trapped her unit for most of the day. The valley fell silent for the first time in hours. The immediate threat was over, and Captain Rodriguez was able to organize his rangers for evacuation of the wounded and withdrawal from the dangerous area. Maria had single-handedly eliminated 8 enemy snipers and saved the lives of her fellow rangers through a combination of professional skill, tactical thinking, and extraordinary courage under fire. As the rangers moved out of the valley that had nearly become their tomb, Maria provided overwatch one final time, ensuring that no additional enemy forces were moving to intercept them. Her mission was complete, but the memory of that day would stay with every ranger who survived the ambush in the Rocky Hills.